I'm Dr. Miranda Lewis, Medical Director for Central California EMS Agency. I want to start by thanking you for your continued commitment to the patients that we serve and for all the hard work that you've put into this effort to improve cardiac arrest survival. In our first year, we saw encouraging results. Survival improved, and that improvement really reflected not just a new skill that was learned, not just the high-performance CPR that you worked so hard to perfect, but it really reflects teamwork and a shared commitment to doing this really well. In 2025, this last year, our data tells a little bit more of a complicated story. We're still in the process of reviewing the data to try to understand what it really means and to ensure that it's accurate, and there is a little bit of data that's still coming in. But our preliminary results suggest that survival has plateaued and maybe even declined. And it would be easy to see this as discouraging, but I think it's really important to understand why this is. This process of improving cardiac arrest survival is not just a one-time intervention. It's not a skill that we learn once and move on from. It's really a continuous process, and one that requires constant attention. It requires vigilance. It requires honest measurement of outcomes and data. It requires reflection of our performance, and it requires retraining and refinement. Every single system that has achieved sustained improvement has gone through this same cycle, this exact cycle, which is progress, plateau, regression, and renewed progress. This is normal and this is expected. And what's not important is that we had a plateau or if we had a dip in survival, but what's important is what we do with that information and how we move forward. The fact that we're measuring outcomes, reviewing performance, that we're investing in ongoing education tells me that we are still on the right path. This year's training is all about refocusing our efforts on the fundamentals, those fundamentals of high-quality manual CPR. It's also about sharpening our execution of those skills, and it's about recognizing that excellence in resuscitation is really built over years and not months. This is a continuous process. In the in-person portion of the training, you're also going to talk about some of the updates the American Heart Association made to their recommendations around cardiac arrest care. Every 5 years or so, the AHA comes out with guidelines for cardiac arrest care. And the American Heart is really a group of scientists, clinicians, and experts in resuscitation who review all of the relevant literature, all of the most recent literature, to give us guidelines about how we should be taking care of our patients. And one important change that I want to highlight is that the American Heart Association recommends strongly against routine use of mechanical CPR devices. We talked about this in last year's training, and we discussed how the mechanical CPR devices really haven't been shown to improve outcomes over standard manual CPR. And the AHA has really supported this recommendation, and we know that manual high-quality CPR does improve survival. So as we're reflecting on our performance in 2025, I ask you to think about when the Lucas device was placed. Was it placed in the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes of resuscitation? Or was it placed just before transport as it was intended? We know the factors that improve survival from cardiac arrest. It's early bystander CPR. It's excellent, perfect, high-quality manual chest compressions with minimal interruptions, and it's early and effective defibrillation. The recipe for improving cardiac arrest survival is simple, but just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy. It's hard work, and the gains are fragile. Just because we improved 1 year doesn't guarantee that we'll improve the next. It's really an iterative process and an ongoing process, but I know that we can achieve those gains and that we can achieve sustained improvement. Our patients really depend on us to do this well and do this right every single time. I want to highlight that in 2025, 45 patients left the hospital alive because of the excellent care that you provided. That's 45 patients that got to hug their families and tell them that they love them again. And that's no small thing. I also want to highlight that in 2025, we released our new cardiac arrest protocol. And the good news is that after the release of this protocol, we did see some improvement of survival. So in the first part of the year, there was a dip, but in the second part of the year, we recovered some of that and survival improved. This tells me that we are on the right path. My hope is that with continued and renewed focus on the fundamentals of high-quality manual chest compressions, with early and effective defibrillation, and with our new protocols, we'll continue to see success in 2026. Thank you so much for your continued engagement and ongoing commitment to this mission. I look forward to what's ahead.
Introduction to High Performance CPR. This training will operationalize the science, develop mastery-level individual skills, add coordination, communication, and team skills, begin a culture of excellence, and emphasize the importance of continuous measurement and improvement. Effective CPR is based on best science, driven by a culture of excellence, by trained, engaged responders with mastery-level skills, choreographed team performance, seamlessly integrated ALS procedures, and measured performance. How we do our job matters. Failure is unacceptable. BLS owns CPR. Take ownership of the resuscitation and outcomes. Patient-focused, real-time peer feedback. The attitude should be, nobody dies in my rig. And the goal of high-performance CPR is everyone in a shockable rhythm survives. Expect improvement. Now we're going to watch a short video by Dr. Michael Kopas, who emphasizes what you believe determines how you perform.
Is that there should be a rule that you obey every day when you go to work, and that is nobody dies in my rig. Nobody dies under my care. I will aim as high as I possibly can to make sure that this individual's life is guaranteed. And when you do that, you work hard to gather skills and style and habits that propitiate success and effectiveness. And it could be that it's a culture, but it's a behavior, it's a willingness to give of yourself so that everybody in the group, including the patient, does extremely well. And when you look back on good athletic teams and when you look back on good medical teams, you think about the medical team that was collected at Baylor and the phenomenal activities of the heart surgery program. It's because everybody contributed and played over their head. Way over their head, and then finally discovered that they could play over their head and set the bar up and played over their head again. So the culture of excellence is pursuing high standards, and every time you reach your standard, set the bar higher. Every time you achieve success in the measurement of a difficult piece of music, then set the bar higher, either more difficult music or faster or better or whatever. But the rule needs to be that I don't take humans for granted, and I will work over my head beyond my capability that I see it to achieve success.
Now we're going to watch a video by Dr. Peter Kudenchuk, who explains the science of saving a life.
Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Kudenchuk. I'm professor of medicine in cardiology at the University of Washington. I'm a faculty member for the Resuscitation Academy and medical program director for King County Medic 1. Thanks for joining me today as we talk about CPR, what it takes to save a life. Survival after cardiac arrest is a time-dependent problem. Even if a first responder comes on scene with a defibrillator and shocks a patient out of cardiac arrest, the time from collapse to that shock determines whether that patient lives or dies. In this slide, you can see that as the bars in this graph, as the likelihood of surviving a cardiac arrest based on the time from collapse to when the first shock is administered. And notice while an early shock is highly effective for terminating ventricular fibrillation, the red line is a line of death. For every minute that passes before a shock is administered, survival falls by about 10%. Notice what happens though if the first responder administers CPR. That red line of death now becomes a gold line of life. It's as if CPR suspends the process of death and buys more time and makes that shock at whatever interval it's given, early, middle, or even later, more likely to save that individual's life. And that kind of CPR, or high-performance CPR, is what we want to talk about today. So let's break it down. What are the components of CPR when someone comes on scene, a first responder, and starts pressing on the chest? Let's break it down into two pieces. The first is compression piece. If you think about the chest or the thorax as a pump, when you are placing your hands on the chest and pushing down, what you're doing is increasing pressure inside the chest. That's called intrathoracic pressure. That pressure that you're generating inside the chest is what ejects blood out of the heart, out of the lungs, and out of everything that sits inside the chest. Meaning the better your compression, the better the blood flow out of the heart, the better the blood flow to the brain, to the kidneys, and every organ that's in the body. Decompression, recoil. That's when you lift your hand off the chest and allow the chest that was compressed to now re-expand to where it was before you started pressing. Now, that creates an interesting thing inside the chest. It creates a vacuum. As the chest is re-expanding, the pressure inside the chest is falling, and it sucks blood back into the heart, back into the lungs, and everything that's in the chest that needs to fill with blood. Meaning, the better the recoil, the stronger that vacuum inside the chest, the better the chest refills, and guess what that means? The next compression is going to have a full chest of blood to pump out to the rest of the body. So here's the challenge. How do we do that and put enough gunpowder in it to make CPR the most effective that it can possibly be? What we call high-performance CPR. Well, here are the 5 what you can call metrics that the American Heart Association recommends for what it takes to deliver effective and high-performance CPR. And they're pretty simple rules. This is not rocket science. The first is optimize your chest compression rate, meaning press the chest at 100 to 120 compressions per minute. Number 2, press deeply, at least 2 inches for every compression. Third, minimize interruptions in chest compressions, meaning keep what's called the chest compression fraction, the percentage of time you're doing CPR in someone who's pulseless, as high as you possibly can. Fourth, let that chest recoil. Don't lean on the chest. Let it bounce back so it can refill the heart. And finally, control breathing and ventilation. Let's talk about each one of these in turn. First question you could ask is, where did we come up with these numbers? 100 to 120 compressions per minute, 2 inches? Did we just make them up? Is there any information, any real studies that tell us these numbers truly make a difference? Well, there are. And let me just delve into the science a little bit with you here. Here's a study of over 6,000 adults who had a cardiac arrest. And during the time that they were being resuscitated, the kind of defibrillators that were put on their chest could measure not only the rhythm that they were in, that whether it needed to be shocked or not, but could also measure the rate of compression. So you could count every compression and how frequently that was given. Now, if you did that and you asked what was the relationship between survival, the left side of the graph, and the rate at which compressions were given, you come up with the gold line that you see in this slide. And notice that at between 100 and 120 compressions per minute, survival is at its peak in these patients who got CPR. Notice also if you press less than that rate, survival falls off, and just as important, if you press faster than that rate, survival also falls off, which says that sweet window of 100 to 120 compressions per minute and staying within that range is a life-saving component of CPR. What about chest compression depth? Meaning, does it matter how deeply you press the chest as to whether it affects outcome? Well, once again, 9,000 patients who had an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest who, while they were getting CPR, you could monitor how deeply the chest was being pressed each time a chest compression was administered. And here's the same graph. On the left side is survival to hospital discharge, and on the bottom is the depth in inches that was administered during CPR. And notice if you look at that red line that right at around 2 inches, you have the sweet spot of maximizing survival in that group of patients. Notice something else. Drop chest compression by ½ an inch and survival falls by 50%. 50% for merely ½ an inch. So if you want an equation to think about the relationship between chest compression, depth, and survival, for every ¼ inch you can increase the depth, survival improves by 5%. You save 5 more people out of 100 by just putting in that extra quarter inch. Makes a big difference. So it makes sense. Chest compression rate, chest compression depth. What about interruptions in CPR? What impact does it have when chest compressions are paused for a short period or even for a longer period during CPR? So let's look at it for a minute. In this particular diagram, you see on top chest compressions being given to the heart. And on the bottom, I'm showing you the pressure that's generated with each one of those compressions. So with CPR, you're generating a blood pressure. Remember that compression is pushing blood out of the heart, out of the chest, and creating a blood pressure. Notice on the right portion of the slide, within 3 seconds of getting your hands off the chest, pressure plummets to 0. No flow anywhere, not to the heart, not to the brain, within 3 seconds. Now I got to be honest with you. I used to think interrupt CPR for 3, 4, 5 seconds, that's like just holding your breath and you just pick up right where you left off. But here's the sad message of CPR. Once you pause CPR, you do not begin where you left off with a high pressure. You start right from the beginning, and it takes you another 30 compressions or about 16 seconds to make up for 3 or 4 seconds of a pause in CPR. What that says is that anytime you pause CPR for more than 3 or 4 seconds, it costs the patient about 20 seconds of perfusion. Now, what difference does that make to survival? In this particular graph, what you see is on the left side, survival to hospital discharge, and on the bottom, interruptions in CPR. The further you go to the right, see what happens to that green line. Survival falls from 30% to 23% to 12% and finally 0% the more interruptions there are in CPR. Those can be short interruptions, they can be long interruptions, but interrupted CPR affects survival. So we've talked about rate, we've talked about depth, and we've talked about the importance of not interrupting CPR. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when you lift your hands off the chest and you have recoil. What can we do to maximize that and to make sure we don't interfere with it? Well, let's go back to the decompression phase of CPR. What's going on at that particular time? Well, remember again, the chest is bouncing back from its original pressed configuration. And as a result, there's a vacuum that's creating inside the chest. That vacuum is refilling the heart and lungs by sucking blood back into the chest itself, meaning the better the vacuum, the better the refilling, and the more the chest is refilled, the better the next compression. Letting that chest recoil is really critical. But here's the problem. Doing CPR is hard work. You are pressing, and often what happens is we get tired, and after we press, instead of lifting our hands and allowing the chest to completely recoil, we tend to keep our hands with just a little bit of pressure on the chest, meaning we don't allow the chest to completely recoil because we're resting on it because we're tired. Now, when we do that, what are we doing? We're interfering with the vacuum that the chest is creating as a result of bouncing back. And what impact can that have on cardiac arrest outcome? Well, a study was done looking at pigs where exactly that was done. What you see in this slide is measuring the blood supply to the heart on the left side and the blood flow to the brain on the right side. And this is the measure of blood supply to the heart and to the brain during regular CPR in these pigs. Full compression, full decompression. The study then did something very interesting. They did everything the same except they didn't take their hands completely off the chest. They left in these pigs just a fraction of an inch of pressure on the chest, like you were leaning, like you were tired, and they said, what effect did that have on blood supply to the heart and blood supply to the brain? And if you look at this, you can see that the heart lost a third of its blood supply, and the brain lost half of its blood supply, simply by not letting the chest recoil to its full configuration after it was compressed. So, chest compression rate, chest compression depth, not interrupting CPR, and allowing full recoil of the chest. What about ventilation, breathing in cardiac arrest? Let's talk about that just for a moment. First of all, the question is, does a first responder necessarily have to ventilate someone who's in cardiac arrest? And the answer is yes and no, and let me explain that to you. On the right side of this particular slide, you're seeing measures of oxygen on top and measures of carbon dioxide in the blood on the bottom. And what you can see is that the red line for oxygen and the blue line for carbon dioxide change during cardiac arrest when no ventilation is being provided. Oxygen in the red line declines over time. Carbon dioxide, the blue line, increases over time because you can't get CO2 out and you can't get oxygen in if you're not ventilating. But notice this, for the first 4 to 5 minutes after someone collapses, CO2 levels, carbon dioxide, and oxygen levels are essentially unchanged, which means for the first few minutes of cardiac arrest when someone has ventricular fibrillation, breathing doesn't matter. The problem comes after 4 or 5 minutes, particularly when you're doing CPR, that now the body needs oxygen and the body needs to get rid of CO2, and that's where ventilation comes into play. What we do with ventilation is we're blowing oxygen into the lungs and then allowing CO2, carbon dioxide, to come out of the lungs. That's important because it's providing those nutrients, oxygen, into the blood, so when we pump the chest, we're delivering not just blood without oxygen, but blood that has oxygen in it. But here's the problem when we overdo it. If you breathe too often, or you breathe too forcefully, remember what each breath does. It's putting pressure inside the chest, right? It's doing it by the air that we're pushing in. And if the heart and chest want to refill at the same time, you're fighting two battles, the vacuum and the air coming in. So we want to be cautious about how vigorously and how frequently we ventilate. If you ventilate too vigorously, you're potentially going to compromise CPR. If you don't ventilate at all, the patient's going to lose their oxygen and the ability to get rid of carbon dioxide. But what's the bottom line? Here it is. Number one, ventilation is important, but it's not the most important thing for a first responder to do in the first 4 to 5 minutes. That's where hands-only CPR works because ventilation isn't critical. Number two, after that, breathing and ventilation become important. But excessive breathing works against CPR because it works against chest refilling. Also remember, when the heart is in cardiac arrest, even with CPR, it's not a normal cardiac output. And as a result, the amount of breathing and ventilation doesn't have to be the same as in a normal breathing person. It can be less. How do we do that? Give small breaths, sufficient to see the chest rise, and you're done. You don't need to put a big cannon of air inside the chest. A small amount will do the trick. It'll get oxygen in, it'll get CO2 out, and the patient will do better as a result. So here we are, 5 metrics of high-performance CPR. Optimize chest compression rate, optimize chest compression depth, minimize interruptions in CPR, promote full chest recoil, don't lean on the chest, and control breathing and ventilation. Now I can promise you something. You do that, you do high-performance CPR, and you will maximize the success that you will have in resuscitating that patient. And the marriage between that kind of CPR and defibrillation, done as soon as you can possibly do it, will save lives. You will save lives putting that package together every time you encounter someone in cardiac arrest.
Key concepts of effective CPR: BLS ownership of CPR, coordination and communication among rescuers, well-defined roles, and efficiency in choreography. Mastery level individual skill performance includes an initial assessment of less than 10 seconds, chest compressions with an emphasis on rate, depth, and recoil. We will be using a metronome. Controlled ventilations, approximately 350 to 500 mLs. Optimal use of AED, monitor, or defibrillator. and an integration of ALS skills without interrupting compressions. Coordinated team performance. Eliminate all unnecessary interruptions by utilizing standard roles and commands, a focus on choreographed movement, hover hands over chest and shock button during analysis, and locate femoral pulses during compressions, analysis, and quick look. High-performance teams are successful when positions are pre-assigned prior to arrival. The assessor, which includes AED, monitor, and defibrillator, the compressor, ventilator, timekeeper and countdown, and on deck, who's next up for compressions. High-performance CPR includes some new commands: hover, rotate, start CPR, stop CPR, and check pulse at the femoral artery. Continuing with our commands: analyzing, clear, shock, no shock advised, shocking. When counting compressions in a 30 to 2, count the last few compressions. For example, 27, 28, 29, 30. And give a countdown before switching compressors. 30 seconds till rotate. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Switch compressors. Here is what high-performance CPR looks like in a 2-rescuer response, a BLS response, and a BLS and ALS integrated response.
Sir? No pulse. Start CPR. Point to right, very good.
Apply pads. Plug in pads connector next to flashing light.
Okay, we've got about another minute of CPR.
Okay.
Apply pads. Plug in connector.
Okay, it's about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Clear to analyze.
Apply pads to patient. Stay clear
Analyzing.
of patient.
Rotate.
Analyzing.
Ready for shock? You ready?
Stay clear of patient. Shock advised.
Okay, we're shocking. Continue
Shock
compressions.
delivered. Begin CPR.
Ready the chest and hover. No pulse, start CPR. Put compressions on board. Better analyze, hover.
Stay clear of patient. Analyzing. Shock advised.
Shock advised, prepare to shock, hover. Go.
Shock delivered. Begin CPR.
Five, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. Good pulses with compressions. This one. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. Gunner, you can release the airway. Approaching 5th round, you're going to rotate out after this 5. We're going to analyze. Six, 7, 8, 9, 30. Rotate. Hover. Analyzing.
Stay clear of patient. Analyze.
Shocking. Go.
Shock delivered.
6, 27, 28, 29, 30. Just ventilations. 20.
Matt, how's it going?
Good.
What you guys at? 28, 29, 30.
One more respiration round.
Good ventilation.
Swap out so we can analyze it.
Okay.
After this respiration, Mario, you hop out.
20. 28, 29, 30.
Okay, and continue with compressions. After this cycle, we'll analyze.
Okay.
Remember, we'll hover while we analyze.
20. 6, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Okay, clear to analyze.
Clear of patient.
You want to hop out, Andrew?
Shock advised. Stay clear of patient.
Hover.
Deliver shock.
Continue. Okay, we're going to switch over to your machine.
Yes. Going for the VTI.
Okay. 30.
25, 26, 27.
After these
28,
ventilations, I'm going to have you
29,
go off to the right.
The IV.
Yeah.
2.
Okay, slide off to the right.
So we're on our machine now. Good.
Okay.
Okay, there's a good view there. Okay, tubes past the cords.
IV secured. 9, 30. Who's on timer
Okay,
right
title
now?
one. Go ahead and add
30
that,
seconds in.
please.
30 seconds in. Go ahead and let me know at
ahead and
30
give me a
seconds
bag.
remaining. 15 seconds remaining so we can
One
do a
more
charge
bag.
if needed.
One more. Okay, we got a nice waveform. Go ahead and continue just every 10 compressions now.
8,
So
9,
tire
10.
last shock was with a VF.
I'm going to go ahead and
Okay.
drop an epi.
Okay. Another bag.
9, 10.
Okay, good lung sounds,
8,
negative
9,
epigastric.
10.
1 minute
Just
in.
get this secured, Kevin, and then I'll be over to help you out.
Now that you understand the science behind high performance CPR, over the next several weeks, we will be holding in-person hands-on training to learn how to operationalize what you have learned so far. The in-person training will include hands-on practice with high-fidelity CPR mannequins for real-time feedback. We are asking you to strive for a culture of excellence where we accept nothing less than perfection in every resuscitation. Thank you for your time and attention. We appreciate all that you do. Be safe out there.